He set off on a solo hike that was supposed to last just 2 days, but he never returned. For almost a year, nothing was known about the fate of Jake Smith, until the shocking truth surfaced in the most unexpected place. This is the heartbreaking story of 22-year-old outdoor enthusiast Jake Smith, who went missing in 2024, and the revelation that stunned everyone in 2025. What happened in the mountains that fateful day? And why did it take almost a year for the truth to come out? Jake Smith was only 22 years old when he left his home in Ridgewood, a small town in Montreal, Canada. To everyone who knew him, Jake was not just another young man. He was calm, thoughtful, and deeply passionate about nature. Hiking for him was not just a hobby, it was his passion, his element. He had already conquered many challenging trails, always striving to go a little further, climb a little higher. By the end of November 2024, Jake had set his sights on Mount Everett. This was not just any trail. Mount Everett, one of the most remote and highest peaks of the Appalachians in Vermont, is famous for its complexity. It is long, winding, and unforgiving. Most hikers avoid it in winter, but not Jake. He was not reckless. He was calculated and experienced. He planned to hike alone. It was the end of November. The weather was unpredictable, but Jake was determined. He traveled to Vermont, a quiet town surrounded by dense forest and rugged terrain. From there, he headed to the Great High Trail trailhead. His name was found in the trail log, dated November 29, 2024. This was the last time anyone heard from him. He didn't elaborate on his trip. Perhaps he saw it as just another hike, another test of his abilities. But this time, something went wrong that no one could have foreseen. On the morning of November 29, 2024, 22-year-old Jake Smith arrived at the Great High Trail trailhead in Lincoln, Vermont. Before setting off, Jake left a note in the trail log, stating that he planned to complete the hike in 1 day. It was supposed to be a routine trip. Challenging, yes, but well within his capabilities. He was experienced. He knew how to handle long trails and rough terrain. But after that morning, no one saw or heard from Jake again. November 30th brought with it a chilling silence. Jake did not return. No call, no message, just a crushing emptiness. His father, feeling the anxiety tightening his heart with each passing minute, immediately reported his son missing. At first, there was hope. Maybe a delay? A night in a tent? With each passing minute, hope faded, giving way to icy fear. December 1st marked the beginning of the official search. Vermont State Police, along with forest rangers, launched a desperate operation. At the trailhead leading to Mount Everett, they were met with a shock. Jake's car was still there, covered in snow. Undoubtedly, it had not moved since he parked it. Anxiety turned into panic. The trail to Mount Everett is a treacherous test, distant and dangerous. Not just a walk in the woods, crossing rivers, battling dense forest, climbing steep slopes. And now, winter. The snow, covering everything around, was up to 4 feet deep, especially at elevations above 3,000 feet. Fierce winds, limited visibility. Even experienced search teams struggled with every step. But they did not give up. Day after day, forest rangers combed the trail. The conditions were unbearable. Helicopters could not take off. Snowshoes barely left a mark in the deep snow. Every step was a battle against the elements. And not a single trace of Jake. No tracks, no equipment, no thing. Search teams, covering more and more territory, desperately searched for any clue, hoping for the slightest hint. But the wilderness remained silent, concealing its secrets. Days turned into weeks. The search never stopped, but it became clear. The chances of finding Jake alive were melting away like snow under the spring sun. Winter in the Appalachians is ruthless. For a person left alone, without communication, the window of survival was terribly short. But his family held on to hope. Even when the headlines in the newspapers faded, they waited. They believed that one day, one way or another, they would find out what happened to their son in those mountains. But for now, the forest remained silent, and Jake Smith remained missing. The search for 22-year-old Canadian hiker Jake Smith plunged Vermont State Forest Rangers into one of the most intense rescue operations in years. The discovery of his abandoned car at the Great High Trail trailhead in Lincoln was a warning sign. The situation promised to be critical. An experienced hiker was missing in the wild expanses of the Appalachian Mountains, and time was running out relentlessly. The day after his disappearance was reported, teams rushed into action, but the harsh conditions foreshadowed a struggle. Winter was raging in the White Mountains. Snowdrifts, rising 4 feet above 3,000 feet above sea level, turned every step into a titanic effort. The deep snow not only slowed down the search. He erased tracks, buried evidence, and disoriented by obscuring landmarks and trails. Mount Everett, Jake's intended destination, was supposedly one of the most secluded peaks in the region. It's not a place one stumbles upon by accident. Reaching it requires commitment. The trail leading to the summit is winding, challenging, and lengthy, often presenting difficulties even in summer. In late November and early December, it becomes deadly. Rangers had to hike for hours to reach areas needing inspection. Every ascent, every descent, every traverse through dense woods or icy streams was made with the awareness that they might be hours behind someone needing help, or worse. Despite this, the response was overwhelming. 59 forest rangers dedicated themselves to the search. They hiked over 400 miles, day after day, shift after shift, hoping for any sign. A piece of clothing, a disturbance in the snow, anything that might lead them to Jake. But the snow kept falling, and the trails remained silent. The terrain didn't make things easy. The Appalachian wilderness is harsh and unforgiving. Deep ravines, icy streams, tangled thickets, and steep ridges slowed progress. In some areas, rangers had to hack their way through snow-laden brush or scale icy ledges, carrying heavy rescue packs. Footing was treacherous. Visibility was often poor. Even seasoned rescuers admitted it was some of the most challenging terrain they had ever worked in under such extreme winter conditions. Hopes for a technological breakthrough melted like snow in the spring sun. Helicopters, brought in to scour the forest from above, proved ineffective. Infrared scanners aimed at detecting heat faced the same difficulties as the ground search teams. Snowfall and heavy cloud cover hampered visibility from above, while the dense forest canopy prevented infrared radiation from penetrating the thicket. Technology, on which so much hope had been pinned, became just another obstacle. Days stretched into weeks. 8 days. Not a trace, not a sound, not a hint of Jake. And then the mission changed its status. It went from being a rescue operation to a search and recovery mission. This shift in terminology spoke volumes. The goal was no longer to bring Jake back alive. The goal was to bring him home, at any cost. But even after the reclassification, the Rangers didn't give up. An Appalachian search and rescue member reported that the search continued tirelessly. These weren't just walks in the woods. They were meticulously planned, grueling searches, covering vast areas. The teams understood the magnitude of the task before them. They understood the weight of responsibility on their shoulders, to the family, to the community, to everyone who was anxiously following the situation. Weeks turned into months, and the snow continued to blanket the trails. Nature was slowly erasing all traces. Any signs left by Jake were likely buried beneath layers of snow and ice. The mountain remained silent despite all efforts, but they kept searching. Then, on May 10th, 2025, the snow melted, and winter's harsh grip finally released the mountains. That Saturday morning, a group of hikers embarked on the challenging climb of Mount Everett in Franklin County, Vermont. The trail was secluded, steep, and not for the faint of heart. Few hikers chose Everett unless they had a compelling reason. These hikers were experienced. They knew the silence of the forest. They understood how the mountain breathed. As they ventured deeper into the trail near Great High, something changed. The air seemed to thicken, filled with foreboding. One of the group, attuned to subtle details, caught a faint, unnatural outline at the side of the trail. It was hidden in the undergrowth, about 20 feet from the path. At first, it looked like old gear, discarded clothing, a forgotten backpack, the usual debris one might find in the woods. But as they got closer, their blood ran cold. What lay before them was not gear. It was the outline of a human body, weathered by time, partially decomposed, intertwined with fallen leaves, soil, and years of oblivion. There was no movement, no sound. The forest, moments before filled with birdsong and rustling leaves, seemed to freeze in horror. Numbness gripped the group. No one dared to touch anything. They retreated and immediately called the police. It didn't take long. By then, the story of Jake Smith, the experienced hiker who had gone missing 5 months earlier, was well known. When the Vermont State Police and forest rangers arrived, they cautiously approached the grim discovery. The narrator, with a tremor in his voice, pauses as if trying to compose himself. He clenches his hands into fists, recalling the moment. Nothing could be touched until the coroner arrived. Every inch of the scene had to be preserved. The remains were recovered that same day. No identifying marks were found on the body, and the degree of decomposition made visual identification impossible. But there were clues, items of clothing, a watch, hiking boots. Certain brands matched those Jake was thought to have worn. Still, it wasn't enough. The narrator, looking into the distance, shakes his head. The remains were sent to forensic pathologist Dr. David Johnson for examination. The following days stretched into an agonizing eternity. Family members waited with bated breath, suspended in anxious anticipation. The rescuers, who had once scoured the snowy trails, hoped for closure, for any semblance of clarity. Then, finally, confirmation arrived. The body was that of Jake Smith, the very same 22-year-old from Brooklyn who had embarked on a solo hike on November 29, 2024, and never returned. His disappearance had triggered an 8-day search involving over 50 forest rangers and covering nearly 400 square miles of rugged terrain. The narrator, with a voice tinged with bitterness, shifts his gaze to the listeners. Now, after months of silence, his story had resurfaced. Off-trail, concealed beneath a layer of forest duff, found not far from where he was last seen. The precise cause of death was never released. No weapon was discovered. There was no hint of foul play in the official reports, yet questions, like nagging shadows, clung to the mind. Why was he found so close to a well-traveled trail? Lost, injured, disoriented. Had he tried to survive the icy grip of the blizzard that had descended upon those parts just days after his disappearance? No one could say for sure. But what haunted most was the thought of Jake. All those long winter months, lying there, alone, silent, only steps away from unsuspecting hikers. The woods had kept their grim secret. In May 2025, near Mount Everett, a body was discovered, bringing an end to the 5-month mystery that had gripped 2 countries. When the news broke, it confirmed the worst fears, but the silence that followed was unbearable. The identity of the deceased was officially confirmed. It was Jake Smith, the 22-year-old Canadian hiker who had gone missing the previous November. Police promptly took on the somber task. The Vermont State Police took the lead in the investigation. Their task was to secure the scene, collect evidence, and ensure accurate identification. But the elements had taken their toll. The remote location of the discovery and the harsh Appalachian winters had erased many clues. The Vermont Department of Environmental Conservation, known as DEC, also re-entered the picture. DEC forest rangers had been involved in the initial rescue operations, launching an intensive search for Jake as soon as he was reported missing. In their public statement following the discovery, DEC expressed their deepest condolences to Jake's family. But they did something else. They paid tribute to their rangers for their unyielding dedication. It was a bittersweet acknowledgement of a tragedy that no effort could have prevented. The Franklin County coroner oversaw the autopsy process. The remains were sent to forensic pathologist Dr. David Johnson for examination, tasked with determining the cause of death. But even after the autopsy, clarity remained elusive. Undetermined cause of death, that's what the official report stated. For Jake's family, it was a heartbreaking confirmation of incompleteness. The discovery of his body answered one question: where he ended up. But at the same time, it spawned a multitude of others. How did he die? Did he fall? Was he caught in a storm? Did he get lost or freeze to death? The answer was never found. And in that ominous silence, only conjecture filled the void where the truth stubbornly remained silent. In Montreal, his hometown, he was mourned. He was full of life, eager for adventure. Jake wasn't reckless. He had signed in at the trail register, was prepared for a day hike, and had years of hiking experience. But in the Appalachians, even experienced people are powerless in the face of nature. And that November, the mountains were unforgiving. The story didn't end with press conferences or dramatic arrests. It ended with a dry official statement confirming that Jake had been found, but investigators were unable to determine the cause of his death. The shock wasn't the sudden twist. The shock was how a vibrant life could end so abruptly, disappear without a trace, and be discovered so far from help, without any clarity. Authorities did not suspect foul play. There was no evidence, but the lack of a conclusion was enough to sow unease. He left on a cold morning. 5 months later, he was found in the woods. Between them, only silence. Officials involved in the search operation acted promptly and with complete dedication. Search teams covered hundreds of miles, often in harsh weather conditions. Helicopters took to the air, despite the bad weather. Dogs and drones were used. Rangers combed the snowy trails on foot. In total, it was one of the largest search operations in the region's recent history. And despite all efforts, nature kept its secret until spring. The tragedy of Jake Smith is a chilling reminder. Even when everything is done right, when a hiker is prepared, experienced, and follows all instructions, there are forces that cannot be foreseen. The mountains hold stories, but they don't always share them. For the Vermont authorities, the search is over. For the DEC, it's another operation filed away. But for Jake's family and everyone who followed his fate, the mystery remains unsolved. There are no answers. There is only the knowledge that somewhere between the trailhead and the summit, Jake disappeared, dissolving into the wilderness. And after 5 long months, he returned, without a voice to tell his story. The official cause of death remains undetermined, but investigators, experts, and concerned individuals have put forward many theories, trying to understand what happened to Jake Smith in the unforgiving Appalachians. These theories are based on facts related to the dangers of hiking, the features of the terrain, the vagaries of the weather, and human behavior in extreme survival situations. Theory 1. Accidental fall. The most logical and common version of what happened to Jake Smith during his fateful hike is an accidental fall. This is, unfortunately, not uncommon in the mountains, especially in the rugged, challenging terrain of the Appalachians. The Mount Everett area, where Jake was last seen, is known for its steep cliffs, rocky slopes, and treacherous ledges. These features make the area extremely dangerous for hikers. Even experienced travelers can face difficulties trying to safely navigate these sections, especially in harsh conditions. Imagine, late November. The trails are likely covered in snow and ice, turning every step into a test of endurance. The frost pierces to the bone. Daylight is short, visibility is limited, and the risk of stumbling increases many times over. Imagine yourself walking along a narrow path covered in treacherous ice. The wind fiercely bites your face. The cold numbs your body. One wrong step, and suddenly the ground is slipping out from under you. Chances of rescue are slim to none. A fall from such a height can lead to fatal injuries. Jake's remains were found about 5 months after his disappearance, far from the trailhead where he began his hike. This distance suggests that he most likely fell into a ravine or down a steep slope, ending up in a place inaccessible to rapid detection and rescue. It is unlikely that Jake could have called for help or survived long enough to be rescued. If the fall resulted in serious injuries, he would have been immobilized. Combined with the harsh winter conditions, this would have made survival virtually impossible. Such accidental falls are, unfortunately, common in mountain hikes. The combination of challenging terrain, unpredictable weather, and the dangers of the wilderness can turn an ordinary hike into a deadly trap. This theory is consistent with the available facts: Jake's disappearance in late autumn, the location of his remains, and the rugged landscape of Everett Mountain. Although we will never know the exact moment of the tragedy, everything points to an accidental fall as the most likely cause of his death. Theory 2. Hypothermia and exposure. The Appalachian Mountains in November spare no one. Although Jake Smith set out on what seemed to be a clear morning, the weather in this region can change in an instant. Temperatures at the summits can drop dramatically, turning moderate conditions into freezing ones in a matter of hours. Even experienced hikers like Jake can get trapped. Hypothermia doesn't take days to take hold. In many cases, it starts in just a few hours, when body temperature drops below 95 degrees Celsius, 35 degrees Celsius. Wet clothing, icy wind, and physical exhaustion accelerate heat loss from the body. And once this process is triggered, the danger quickly escalates. First, shivering begins, but as hypothermia progresses, the brain begins to shut down normal functioning. Confusion sets in. Simple solutions such as turning back, using a GPS, or finding shelter become unavailable. Victims may even feel strangely warm, a condition known as paradoxical undressing, where they remove clothing despite the freezing temperatures. If Jake had found himself in such a state, disoriented and perhaps convinced he would find a way out, he might have wandered further off the trail, which explains why his remains were discovered almost 5 months later in a remote area of the forest. And there he is, alone. No one to argue with him, no one to warn him against a fatal decision, when the cold had already gripped his limbs. No one to point the way back, no one to shout for help into the air. Foresters and investigators, after sorting through all the evidence, found no traces of violence, no signs of a wild animal attack. His gear was found, but the ruthless isolation and harsh conditions of the autumn Appalachians may have proved a deadly test even for an experienced hiker. Ultimately, the most likely theory remains that Jake Smith got lost, froze to death, a solitary victim of the silent killer: hypothermia. But let's turn to a third, more disturbing possibility: an encounter with an animal. The Appalachians, where Jake's life ended, are a realm of wilderness. Towering pines stretch skyward for miles. Trails disappear into the backwoods, and the forest is home to a multitude of wild creatures, some harmless, others deadly. Black bears are native to these parts, coyotes, bobcats, and even moose are also present. Most of these animals avoid humans, but encounters are inevitable, especially when a hiker is alone, and especially in the cold months when the instinct for self-preservation, the protection of meager food supplies and territory, are heightened to the extreme. Although the autopsy revealed no obvious signs of attack, no bite marks, no claw wounds, experts point out one important fact: not every animal encounter leaves visible injuries. Sometimes it's panic that kills. Imagine, you're trekking alone through a dense forest. The cold chills you to the bone. The nearest shelter is hours away, and suddenly, a rustling in the undergrowth, a deep growl, movement in the treetops. You freeze. Something is watching you. It's entirely possible that Jake encountered a large animal, perhaps a black bear, or simply heard a frightening sound. In a split second, instinct could have taken over. Fight or flight. And alone, in the forest, most would choose flight. If he ran from the animal, he could have ventured deeper into unfamiliar territory, straying from the trail onto snow-covered ground with hidden traps. In this chaos, where every step could be the last, deadly danger lurked. Slipping, injuring yourself, losing your bearings. This is just the beginning. Far more terrifying is panic, that insidious enemy of the mind. It is known to seize a person, causing them to run aimlessly, lose track of time, forget about warmth, and disregard signs leading to salvation. And although no animal has been officially implicated in Jake's disappearance, this theory does not imply a physical attack. It suggests that the fear caused by a possible encounter with a wild animal could have triggered a deadly chain reaction. After all, in the wilderness, sometimes it's not the animal itself that kills, but the terror it inspires. The fourth theory is a medical catastrophe. Imagine you're alone, in the wilderness, with no signal, no one around, and suddenly, a racing heartbeat, blurred vision, a leg giving out. This version is considered one of the most serious and plausible in the case of Jake Smith's mysterious death. Something sudden, unexpected. He was only 22, young, seemingly healthy, and in excellent physical condition, ready for a solo hike on Mount Everett, a challenging and isolated peak in the Appalachians. But the truth is that medical catastrophes don't choose victims by age. Heart disease, even a rare one, can go undetected for years. A sudden arrhythmia, an undiagnosed weakness in a blood vessel, a hidden vulnerability triggered by physical exertion, low temperatures, altitude. It doesn't even have to be something dramatic. A severe asthma attack, a diabetic episode, or simple dehydration leading to confusion, disorientation, and collapse. Some believe that Jake may have overexerted himself, gone too far, too fast. Perhaps he ignored early warning signs: dizziness, chest tightness, or extreme fatigue. In a remote area like Mount Everett, one wrong step is all it takes, and when the body fails, even basic survival becomes impossible. This theory sheds light on the mystery of Jake's disappearance, explaining the absence of signs of violence or struggle on his body, which was found only 5 months later. Not a single broken bone, not the slightest hint of a scuffle, just silence. A medical catastrophe, quiet and imperceptible, would leave no bloody trail. Just a young man in the woods whose legs suddenly gave way. Imagine the scene. He may have felt the first signs of weakness. Maybe he tried to find shelter, hoping the ailment would pass. He lay down to rest, confident that he would soon be able to get up. But the forest is ruthless. It doesn't warn of approaching death. It simply takes. This theory chills the blood with its simplicity. No chase, no attack. Just a body refusing to obey, without warning, without help, without a second chance. Jake's story is a harsh lesson about the importance of preparation. A solo hike in challenging terrain requires not only skills, but also a deep respect for the unpredictability of nature. Having the necessary equipment, navigation tools, and carefully studying the route are all mandatory steps for every hiker. But perhaps the simplest and yet most vital precaution is to always communicate your plans. Share your route, expected return time, and contact information with someone you trust. This could be the deciding factor if something goes wrong. Jake's tragic fate is a reminder of the need to treat wildlife with reverence and awareness. For anyone planning a hike, especially alone, this is a call to be fully prepared and prioritize safety above all else. Whether you love the mountains or are just about to conquer the peaks, remember Jake's story. Respect nature, be vigilant, and never underestimate its power. After all, your life